But what is happening in a lot of communities, and in our community, the community in our area, the community that experienced it the most was Azun. This is a community of 10,000 people. But in this community, there were regular night raids. Raids where the soldiers would come in, they would go to a house in the middle of the night, normally 2 or 3 o'clock, 1 to 3, somewhere in that period of time when everyone is asleep. They would bang on the door. They would demand that they be allowed in, or the door would be broken down. And then they would go up to the bedroom of a child. They'd force everyone else in the house into a living room or a parlor or another room in the house. And then they would question this young boy, anywhere from 12 to 17, 18. But the one that we had direct contact with was a 14-year-old. That was one of the ones we had direct contact with. Another one was 15. And after they'd questioned the boy in his room for an hour and a half, they would arrest him, take him away in handcuffs, leg irons, blindfolded. And the family wasn't told where he was going, where they were taking him. It would most likely be into a nearby settlement where there'd be some sort of jail. And there the questioning of the boy would continue. Depending on the age, they had a time limit. They had to bring the child before a court, either in 2 days or 3 days. When I say a court, it was a military tribunal, not a court like we're used to. It was a court where there were military officers who would be the triers of fact. And they wouldn't need warrants to arrest these children. They would just be arrested on suspicion. And the first time the family or a lawyer would see this child would be when he, and it was almost invariably a boy, was brought into the court 2 or 3 days later. And go back to Azun, where this was happening. Here are the settlements that surrounded the area of Azun on their farmland and taking their land. And this was a gate. There were 3 roads leading into Azun, just outside the community, where on paper Israel had full control. They erected gates on each of these roads so the Israeli military could come and close the gates at any time and just shut down access to or from the community. And this is one of those gates. And this is just a picture of soldiers stopping vehicles at a checkpoint. But Keith mentioned a child. This is Ahed Tamimi. She is a hero to a lot of Palestinians right now. Her family lives in a community of 200 people. 200, the number varies, but 200 to 300 people. And basically it's a Tamimi family community. They're all Tamimis, and they've been resisting the occupation in the best ways they know how. And so since Ahed has been a young girl, she's been protesting, shaking her fists at the soldiers. But one day last December, I had heard that her cousin, who was 15, had been shot in the head by Israeli soldiers at very, very close range. May have been a rubber-coated bullet, but he was, there's a picture of him after he was shot. He's a 15-year-old boy. I had heard that, and then the soldiers, 2 of them, came on to the Tamimi, her own family compound inside their gates, and Tamimi and another cousin, all women, and her mother and an aunt went out to confront the 2 soldiers, and Ahed hit one of the soldiers, or both of them, and kicked without weapons, and the soldiers finally left. Nothing happened at that point. The mother had a video camera and took pictures of it all, and it got up on the internet, what had happened. 3 days later, and I think that was December 19th, soldiers came in the middle of the night at 1 o'clock, did what they did in a Zoom. They went up to her bedroom, arrested her, took her away. It's unusual for that to happen to a girl, but she was 16 and she was taken away at that point. She's still being held today. She's being held in jail in Israel, but she's brought into a military tribunal for her court appearances. I think there's been 2 court appearances so far. But, and there's a picture of Ahed in custody being brought into the court. She has a lawyer. They are resisting. They are not doing what most children do and what Defense of Children International recommends that children do in their own best interest, basically, to get out of the system as quickly as possible and plead guilty to something. She hasn't pled guilty to anything yet, and so she could be held in jail if she persists in that for up to a year, waiting for her trial to be completed.
What's she been charged with?
Well, for assaulting the officers, for the kicking and striking, and they also dug deep back, and she was charged, as most Palestinians are, at some time in her past, she threw stones. So they've said she threw stones. Now, a Palestinian child who has thrown stones, if they throw the stones at a moving object, they can get, if they throw the stones at a stationary object, like the Israeli wall that's been built, they can get up to 10 years in jail for that. And if they threw the stone at a moving object, such as a tank, we saw in the picture there, they could get up to 20 years in jail for that. So she's been charged with throwing stones, not sure against what, so she could get, if convicted, up to that for that. I'm not sure what the charge is for kicking the soldier or throwing, punching the soldier, but at this point, she has a lawyer, and they are not pleading guilty, and they want to go to trial. On the last court appearance, the lawyer was bringing a motion challenging the authority of the court, the military court, to try her, and there were consular officials from many countries there. I'm not sure if our country was there. There were media from many countries at the court hearing, but the court excluded them all, saying you're not allowed in. The lawyer wanted them in to see what was happening, but military courts have a 99+% conviction rate. They're not trials like we have. What happens when the children are in custody, almost invariably, the child, just to end that initial custody period, will sign a statement admitting to throwing stones or doing something. Usually it's in Hebrew, which the child doesn't understand, but even a statement in Hebrew signed by a Palestinian who doesn't understand Hebrew will be admitted in court as evidence against him. And so who knows what's going to happen to Tamimi? Saw a picture of her recently that someone suggested that she's her will may not be standing up, but it's a very difficult situation. And here's the stats of children that was produced by a human rights organization, Israeli human rights organization, recently. And it indicates that as of November 30th, there were 25 children, minors, being detained. I understand that this probably means before any charges are issued. Then there's 181 of them that are being held pending the end of their judicial legal proceedings. There are 105 that are currently under sentence. There are 2 administrative detainees, I'll mention that in a moment, for a total at that point, November 30th, of 313. So right now, Ahed Tamimi is added one more. She's in this category here of waiting till the end of their legal process and being held in custody. The administrative detainees, Israel has a law, a rule. It came down, the British had used it as well, but not to the extent that Palestine, not the extent that Israel does, whereby they can take a person into custody, not charge them at all with anything, any offense, but hold them for 6 months at a time. And at the end of that 6 months, they can just roll it over and roll it over again. I showed you the picture of the farmer, Fayez Tanib. He had been held for 4 successive 6-month administrative detention orders, and then was finally released, never had a trial for whatever he was accused of. Never accused of anything because he was never charged, he was just held. We have a campaign the United Church supports. It's the No Way to Treat a Child. One of our partners, and one that I visited in Palestine, is Defense of Children International Palestine. They provide most of the lawyers for children that are detained by the Israeli authorities. And they have a current campaign called No Way to Treat a Child. It started in the US a couple of years ago, and apparently it has had some success. So late last year it was started in Canada. And we're encouraged to write to our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, and our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Chrystia Friedland, urging them to bring whatever influence they can on the Israeli government to stop this practice of arresting children and treating them in this way. The UN has a Declaration on the Rights of Children, and this is in total violation of that. And Israel is a party to that convention. So this is just a piece of art that I picked up while I was there, a picture of it, but it shows a grandmother or grandfather passing on a key to a grandchild. At least that's the way I interpret it. And keys are a great symbolism for Palestinian, because it shows their attachment to the land and how important that is to them. I was in Palestine in 2006, and I took this picture of a boy on a wall back then. And I can't imagine, don't know what age he was at the time, but clearly in 2017 he was 12 or older, and I'm just wondering what happened to him, because any number of things could happen to him after age 12. That's Salam, peace in 3 different languages, and that's what we're all working for. Peace with justice.